Roll up, roll up, roll up. And see these funny little creatures in the native habitat.
Pull to open.
Pull to open!
Yes, and what do you do?
People and creatures just looking at us for kicks in a sort of a peep show.
That's right, Joe.
They must be evil and horrible.
Watch out for the monster.
Here comes the drums!
So here it comes, the sound of drums. Here come the drums, here come the drums.
Hello, and welcome to Pull to Open, an ongoing quest to watch all of Doctor Who in random story order. I'm Chris Taylor.
And I'm Pete Paschal. And Chris and I, we're both writers, fans, journalists who've actually been addicted to Doctor Who for decades.
Yeah.
And we even occasionally write about the show, but we always have a lot to say about it. And that's what we like to do here.
Yeah, this is our attempt, or at least my attempt, to cure my Doctor Who addiction by only watching one story a week, and by going through all the backlog of stuff that I've never seen before. Which is not the case this week or last week. The most recently, I was introduced 2 episodes ago to the Mark of the Rani, which I hadn't seen. Before that, it was the Romans, which I also hadn't seen. But last week, we talked about Legopolis, one of my favorite ever episodes. We call them Viscount Bangers here, the really good ones on Pull to Open. And we decided that's what it was. And the randomizer has since taken us to another old school favorite. Season 10, Serial 2. It's Carnival of Monsters, everyone.
Boop, 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 pew, 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 pew. Sorry, I rub up my pews.
Yes, Carnival of Monsters. Spoiler alert, love it, but it is so bright that I had to wear shades for this podcast.
That's what that is.
Yeah.
Deal with it, people.
It's also early Sunday California morning, and staring right out of my window here at the Golden Gate. So, yeah. It's good.
Wow,
good
you have a
to be
view of the
cool.
Golden Gate? I didn't even know that.
That's right. That's what's just out of shot, along with the Watcher from last week in most Pull to Open podcasts, just right over there. Maybe if we get to a certain number of subscribers, I'll turn the camera around. You'll see it. First time.
Cool. Pixar didn't happen. Awesome. Yeah, no, this is pretty awesome to get to this show. It's definitely a favorite of a lot. It's also there's kind of a clear through line for the randomizer here, I gotta say. Seems completely not random this time to go to Carnival of Monsters.
Yeah, the randomizer really wants us to talk about the 5 Faces of Doctor Who, that absolutely seminal series of repeats on British TV that changed so much, but we'll get into that. Mm-hmm. But first, you may be listening to this directly after listening to Legopolis, our show on Legopolis, which had some interesting moments, some of them not intended.
It was a very special episode for our power listeners. So if you're a super fan of Pull to Open and you really look forward to the new episode and you download it right away, you got something extra special last week when Chris nearly ran out of power on his MacBook and needed to run and get a power cord.
Pete, spoilers. Spoilers. This is just for premium subscribers. Something happened that was not planned or scheduled, and it was accidentally uploaded. So that's what you get. If you are fast, if you are quick on the draw with Pull to Open, you download immediately. You might get a special, unplanned behind-the-scenes moment.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a special edition for you power users. We're always here with more behind-the-scenes stuff. They're rare, but it happens. Now we've sorted that out, so you have the correct edit now if you go back to that episode.
That's right. And you also have the correct codex if you go to the show notes. As we mentioned at the end of Legopolis, if you got there, we've been missing Destiny of the Daleks all this time. So Destiny of the Daleks merged at the end of the Legopolis episode, Watcher-like, with the Codex. Turned out it was the Codex all along. And we now have 301 shows that we're visiting in random order instead of 300. Oops.
Yeah, had been erased from the time stream. And so, we got back to the one true timeline. Thank you, Time Variance Agency.
Yes.
But no, we're good. Destiny of the Daleks is in there, and the Codex is fully revised to accommodate it. And we'll we may be doing some updating on previous show notes. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, maybe we just stick to the original numbering and let people figure it out.
Yeah, it could be. So, hey, folks, before we get into this week's commentary, we want to just say, as always, this is, if you're enjoying what you're hearing, if you like our podcast, please leave a review. It really does help out the pod. We're not telling you at all what to write, but if you have a 5-star review in you, we have a special place in our heart for those. And it doesn't really take long. You can pause the playback here. You can just leave a review with one emoji, one character will do it.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
Yeah.
Do an emoji review of a particular episode. Make us guess what that episode is, and we will eventually feature those emoji summaries of all Doctor Who stories in the Codex itself. So you have the opportunity to stake your claim on a particular Doctor Who story in emoji form.
Awesome. And if you do that, you also get entered for a chance to win the prize for the person who is a randomly chosen person from the first 50 reviewers of the show. And it's going to be something special, something from our collection.
Something special, and it's something from Pete's collection in particular. And I've been narrowing it down through a game of 20 questions that I feel must have got to at least 48 questions by now. It feels like that's how long we've been doing it, but we narrowed it down. It's New Who. It's sort of era straddling, but we've narrowed it down to like Moffat and specifically Matt Smith era thing. It's mineral. It's something that Amy encountered. And Pete, I think I'm ready to make my first guess.
Okay.
My first actual guess as to what this is. Given that it's mineral, given that it's Matt Smith era, given that it's sort of straddling showrunners, doctors,
right? Right.
Given that Amy definitely encountered it, and I think the giveaway is the last week you said, "Oh yeah, of course she did," which makes me think, is it a weeping angel?
Oh, I'm gonna have to go with no.
Oh, I thought I had it there. It was mineral.
I guess they're mineral most of the time when you're looking at them.
They are. Exactly that. Exactly that. I guess they turn animal when nobody's looking. Nobody even knows.
Right?
We've never seen a moving weeping angel.
I know.
Yeah. So okay, but it's not.
We have, but we just don't talk about that.
It gets immediately erased from the brain. No, that's the silence.
Exactly.
Right. All right, so we'll have another guest next week. We'll figure out what that is.
Yeah.
Please send in
with
your reviews. With your reviews, send in a question for Pete because I'm kind of out of ideas at this point.
And you can leave that question wherever you like, either in the review, where to find it on one of our social networks, either TikTok at Pull to Open, the Twitters at Pull to Open 63, the Instagrams at Pull to Open 63, or YouTube, where that's where the party is, which is youtube.com/Pull to Open.
A very own URL.
Yeah, we're doing a lot more there now. We're obviously uploading new episodes of the podcast every week on Saturdays.
We dote on our episodes and then we updote on them. Yes,
exactly. And we're getting older episodes, which we hadn't had a chance to upload before. Those are coming every week on Wednesdays. So they keep coming. We had I think The King's Demons this past week, and Dark Water, Death in Heaven should be coming up soon.
That's so exciting. If you can't get enough Pull to Open, you now get midweek Pull to Open.
Yeah, totally. So you YouTube guys are definitely in for a treat. You're getting all the old school shorts that we did. Those are getting uploaded at the same time. So it's going to be a feast at YouTube. All our plot summaries are there, and we keep doing those week after week. So please check it out. And doing more on the video side has also enabled us to be live on Spotify video podcasts. So I know a lot of you like to listen on Spotify. Now you can watch on Spotify as well. How about that?
Yeah. I wonder if anyone's had that experience of like, I'm listening to this podcast and you pull the phone out of the pocket and it's like, there's both of our shining faces right there. It's a little extra. If you want to look at us while listening to us, you now have that option. And speaking of looking, That's something that people do on TikTok, which is where we're it's still our most popular platform. Although we're getting a lot of likes on Instagram lately, I've noticed.
Yeah,
The Instagram likes have kind of mushroomed, but still TikTok most popular social platform. We're heading for 10K followers. We're at 7.5 ish.
Getting close. We're closing in on 7.5K, which is a pretty good milestone. Now that we've been back from hiatus for a while, I think it'll probably accelerate a little more because we really want to get to 10K, and we'll do something special for y'all there on TikTok when we get to 10K.
That's right. We'll do a Ronnie dance.
Yeah, we're definitely not. It won't be a one-shot thing too either. I think we'll actually really up our presence there in a big way. But come on, keep sharing those videos. Help us out to get to 10K. And one of the things we do like to do is talk about the TikTok comments we get. They're very verbose and can you surprisingly opinionated people. These kids on the internet,
amazing.
And they always sort of surprise me with their takes on various things. So, and this one in particular, this is our TikTok comment on the week, and they were commenting on some of our videos on the Mark of the Ronnie. And this comment comes from someone named the Heir Apparent. The handle is the Heir Apparent, and it goes.
Not even a pun. Yeah.
If the master is an evil theater kid, then the Ronnie is an evil STEM kid. And that makes a great dynamic. And I thought this is just a really smart take on the difference between the master and the Ronnie and why it kind of works. And
and this is also kind of emblematic of the fact that what we have there on TikTok is a lot of New Who fans being introduced to the show and sort of seeing it through the New Who lens, which I think as a fan of the classic show to start is a great way to look at the classic show with new eyes. So if you're one of those people, go check out the TikTok comments because we get, the Ronnie as an evil STEM kid. That's not something you would have heard in 1986.
Right.
But you can, if you look at it through TikTok eyes.
Well, I can see the master and the Ronnie and the doctor all being at the academy together, which I think is sort of the going theory. And I think this nails it really well. Although you kind of have to sort of get the doctor in there, I guess, as the bohemian kid who's just kind of, goofing around on his own. But he seems really, at first he looks detached, but he's actually really just doing interesting stuff.
Not to spoil too much, but speaking of TikTok and Carnival of Monsters, it just makes me think that story was made for TikTok. It's so bright and colorful and has a lot of quick, witty stuff going on. So looking forward to seeing how this show that we're about to do is going to translate.
And there's dancing.
That's right. There is the TikTok dance, the Shona dance that everyone's going to be doing. Everyone's going to be doing the Shona. Or,
the Shona dance
or the Vorg.
Yeah, they both do it. It's pretty cool. We got to get those two together in the same video.
Everyone do the Vorg. It really is. This is, again, not to get into it too early, but Carnival of Monsters 1973, and I've been reading a few essays on it, and the TV milieu that it was part of, and I saw this wonderful quote that Doctor Who is like Top of the Pops with plots. I love that idea. It's never more true than here. So yeah, the dancing is in there. We've got Joe Grant looking like a young David Bowie. It's really just super cool, and I look forward to seeing what we can make of it on the TikToks.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, let's make something of it now. Because I think that we don't have any other business. There's been very little news about Doctor Who. I think they've pretty much wrapped the shooting of the 60th. I could be wrong.
That's right. We're all just waiting to see how Tegan and Ace get in there.
Yeah. Well, that's in the centenary special, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
But all of that, it's just it's been a dearth of news lately. And there's a lot of stuff that goes around on the Twitters about the set shots or whatever, and I think we dabbled a little bit on that, but we're not a spoilery. I've actually really got out of my way to kind of try to avoid those photos since the first news of Tennant and who's Catherine Tate.
There's
the announcement about Neil Patrick Harris, And there's been
Yes.
other stuff that I've had to look away from Twitter because I just don't want to know. I don't want to know what like the monsters are and what the whole story is until
I
it's
I
actually
will
done.
say though, Neil Patrick Harris, the costume that they've got him featured in, it's so bright and colourful and Carnival of Monsters-ish, and that it's kind of
Yeah.
that kind of fun aspect of Doctor Who feels like it's coming back. So
Yeah,
very
yeah.
excited about that. I guess the other big Doctor Who news that we haven't really talked about is that one of the Doctor's regenerations must have walked up to Downing Street in the last couple of days and said to someone, "Oh, Boris Johnson, doesn't he look tired?" That's where we are in time, folks. Boris has sort of resigned, and once again, the UK is facing another prime minister.
The least he could have done was annihilate that Sycorax ship. He didn't even, do that.
I know. He didn't even get to do that. Although,
Yeah,
his tenure isn't actually over, so maybe this is the time to
that's
pull out the
true.
secret weapons.
Yeah,
But
revoke
yeah,
his Torchwood access.
so let's travel back to 1973. Interestingly enough, not to get too political, because of course Carnival of Monsters doesn't get political,
Or does it?
or does it? Speaking of Boris Johnson, the Brexit Prime Minister, Carnival of Monsters aired when Britain joined what became the EU.
Oh,
In January
interesting.
1973, we joined the EEC, European Economic Community, and this was the first European Doctor Who, as it were. So again, interesting timing to be
Yeah,
watching
man.
this.
Randomizer's making all the connections.
It really is. So speaking of making connections and stories, it is time, before we talk about it any further, to do that segment we like to call TLDW. Too long
Okay.
Doctor Who, too long didn't watch. Well, too long did watch, because he really should watch this one.
Yeah.
And in this segment of the show, we take 30 seconds per classic episode, or 1 minute per New Who episode. And Carnival of Monsters is 4 episodes, so Pete, that means you have 2 minutes. One of
I
us
have 2
summarizes.
minutes.
You have 2 minutes. Yes, we take it in turns.
Yep.
I did Legopolis. I did Legopolis in like 1 minute 58. I'd like to point out. So I don't know if we're
a
like
new record.
yeah, exactly. This is I don't know if you want to go for like Olympic record TW here, but that's or do we
I
want to
think
just
we need to like do a sort of an American Idol thing or Dancing with the Stars thing where it's a combination of maybe audience vote and time. Because I could easily do a 10-second one and just cut right to the end.
Yeah.
But you have to leave stuff out, and it's always a question of what you leave out and how you do it within the time frame. So that's always the challenge.
Yes. A mini scope breaks in transit. The end.
Yeah. So it's like you want to give yourself enough time, but not too much time, because you got to avoid the rabbit holes, but you got to fill in what you can. Anyway,
that's true.
I'm stalling now because I honestly this time I knew it was coming, but I sort of consciously didn't prep at all, other than just watching the show and the commentary. So.
It's kind of the way to go, I have to say.
Yeah.
I think with TLTW and also with Carnival of Monsters, it's so loose and carefree and fun that you can definitely over prep for this sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So all right, so Pete, you have 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Are you ready, sir? All your tabs are closed.
All closed.
You're flying blind. Yes, you don't need to.
Zencaster.
Yeah, you don't need to drink a quick sundowner before this.
Let me just get that.
Yeah. You could do. It looks like you could do with a peg, as they say. A lot of drinking in this episode, so it seems appropriate. Numb the pain a little. All right, sir.
Let's do this.
All right. In 3, Carnival of Monsters. Our complete summary. In 3, 2, 1, go.
So the Doctor and Joe materialize on board a ship, even though the Doctor was aiming for Metebelis 3, which is actually in another galaxy. They're kind of confused. Why did this happen? Then suddenly a Plesiosaurus attacks the ship, and they're like, what? This ship's supposed to be in 1926. That makes no sense. And then they realize that the people there are just, their memories keep shifting, and they keep repeating the same sequence. So what they quickly come to realize, not that quickly, but they realize they're not on Earth at all. They're actually, turns out they're in what's called a miniscope.
30 seconds.
It's basically this device that's essentially a portable circus that this guy Vorg and his assistant have taken to this new planet called Interminor. Interminor has been this xenophobic society for a long time, but it's just started to open up, and Vorg and Schurner are there to take advantage of that and basically abuse everyone with their sort of circus act. But there's a weird political Machiavellian stuff going on here with the president's brother, and he's trying to essentially use Borg and Shurna and their miniscope as a way
1 minute.
to make the place more xenophobic, and he's going to sort of take over by releasing one of the evil sort of, not evil, but bad creatures within the miniscope. These are these drashigs. They're really terrifying. And when the Doctor and Joe leave the ship, they actually find the place where the drashigs within the miniscope are kept, because there's all these things are little individual environments called circuits, and the drashigs get the scent of the Doctor and Joe. They bust out. They're loose in the scope. The scope is like breaking down. The Doctor
90
somehow
seconds.
gets out of the scope, and he sort of enlarges to the same size as all the people outside. He works with Vorg to basically hook up the TARDIS to the scopes to transport all of this people back, but not before one of the drashigs. A few of the drashigs get out, and they start. They kill one of the bad dudes in the Interminer stuff. But Vorg takes a laser or something and zaps them, and then he activates the thing that transports everyone back to their environments, and then the Doctor Joe leaves.
Yeah, just about. You just got there. I think that's going to be a photo finish. Really, very, very good. You kind of got everything in there.
Yeah, it was hard.
It's tough because it does go back and forth. It's the first thing we notice about Carnival of Monsters, and one of the biggest changes that was made to the original Robert Holmes script is there's a lot of intercutting between what's going on with the grey people on Interminer, who are literally painted grey, and Vorg and Shurna come along in the most colourful gear that I think anyone has ever seen in Doctor Who, bar none, the most vibrant clothes.
I really want to cosplay as Vorg sometime.
Right?
Like, that guy's coat is amazing.
Yeah, especially if you get the mustache as well. That'd be fantastic. And we intercut between that and the Doctor and Joe on the ship. And we don't see until that wonderful episode 1 cliffhanger where Vorg's hand comes in to grab the TARDIS.
Right.
Which is just a piece of bric-a-brac in the machine. You don't see any way in which these two stories are interconnected. Did you? I mean, that's one thing I didn't really remember from watching Carnival of Monsters before. Did you enjoy the intercutting between the two stories?
I did, and I really liked watching this one with my kids. I have to say, like they were both brand new to it, and they both really, really liked it. I think they didn't really know what was going on, especially my daughter, in terms of like the two environments, and was really surprised about the whole miniscope thing. So it still works. I mean, I got to say, that's kind of my review of Carnival of Monsters. It's like this is one of the episodes of the classic series that really holds up.
Totally holds up.
You know, there's that cliffhanger. There's the cliffhanger with the drashigs. We'll talk about the drashigs later, but I thought they really worked. I really love just Bob Holmes' writing here. You know, he really delivers. I mean, honestly, I think this is one of the better episodes to start anyone on the classic series with.
Yeah.
You know, because it's almost I would say it's textbook.
Yeah.
But it's almost like a pejorative. I think it is textbook, but it's because it isn't like 100% conventional, and there are themes and some politics attached, you know, and all of that. It's actually trying to say something. So it just works, you know, as thematically as well as a very interesting Doctor Who plot. So like,
it works because it's so ahead of its time in so many ways, and one of those ways is that it's very meta.
Yeah,
it's very meta. Totally. Bob Holmes is basically commenting on Doctor Who itself. Totally. He's commenting on you, the audience, who watch the miniscope. There's a wonderful line that Vorg has when he's kind of going through all the monsters that he has in the miniscope, and he's like, I think he's talking about the drashigs, and he says, very popular with the kiddies, very popular with the kids. And it's like, oh yeah, this is a kids show that claims to have no politics in, as Vorg does very, very cheekily. But honestly, for him, it's like he's not the one doing the commentary. But yeah, this literal metaphor for television, which very much takes that thing. And I was actually going to ask you, speaking of your kids watching this, did your kids ever have that kind of the fantasy that's very common with children, certainly in the 70s and 80s, of thinking that televisions actually have people inside them. There are actually little people inside the television.
That's funny. I can't. I'm sure they haven't, just because our TVs have been very, very thin.
Well, that's the thing, is that I wonder if this is just an artifact of the days
Right.
when TVs were big boxy things.
Yeah,
It
I
really
think
did
it is a
feel.
little bit.
Yeah, because these days there are screens, like there's no room for the little people to live in there. But
They
I
call it a glow
certainly,
sphere or something. It was funny.
yeah, I remember one of the first stories I ever wrote as a kid was being invited into the television by Tom Baker's Doctor.
Right.
Right. And it was very much a thing in the 70s, this sort of playing with this notion of the permeable barrier between you and the television in your living room.
Yeah, and you
Right.
think about the Idiot's Lantern, which
Yes.
would not have worked, I think, with flat screens.
No.
Where people are like sucked into the TV, literally. And
Literally, yeah.
yeah.
And
That,
and this was also a thing in the Troughton era, wasn't it? That Troughton used to play with the notion that he could see out of televisions. Like I can't think of
right.
any specific story right now, but that was kind of a minor ongoing thing. That was very much a thing on British television at the time. Like, comedy shows would do that a lot. Monty Python would do it a lot, where the guy on the TV would talk back to someone in the sketch.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
taking that thing that was very much in the culture.
Well, I really like the bit. You already talked about the line where Vorg is talking about what they do. We're here to amuse, simply to amuse.
Yeah.
Nothing serious, nothing political.
Yes.
And I really love it's. I think it's such a great line because I think it's kind of a straightforward description of I think how people think of Doctor Who and sort of by extension, this kind of escapist entertainment. But I mean, as we've talked about before, obviously Doctor Who is political and
Yes.
can be political. It's just very, very good at couching whatever it's trying to say in sort of far off places. And
Yeah.
is
It's
it
so
about the world? Well, of course it's about the world. And even this episode with the political sort of scheming with the Interminor
yes.
tribunal or whatever.
That's the great thing about Vorg saying that, is he's literally saying that to the three grey men who have just sort of said the fact that basically all the working class of their planet are acting up because they
Right.
don't have enough entertainment.
Yeah,
here comes an entertainer to say, "Oh, nothing political." Which is the stuff that flashes by. This is very Douglas Adams before Douglas
Right.
Adams even wrote for Doctor Who, right? This is Robert Holmes showing Douglas Adams how it's done. It's like you bury that political
Totally.
satire. You have the gags that just waltz by and you barely even notice them. Like the company that made the scope, the miniscope, went bankrupt
Right.
because
Yeah.
what was it? The Eternity Perpetuity Company. They never needed to be fixed, so they went broke.
Right. They exactly. They would last forever. So
So the company went broke. I mean, it's so brilliant. So brilliant. And another way in which it's ahead of its time is, of course, the presence of Michael Wisher as one of
right.
those
Yeah.
great people. Calic, who is the guy who tries to foment the rebellion.
Yeah. So just to quickly close the book on the political line, I was
Yeah.
kind of wondering a little bit how that line might land today.
Yeah.
I feel like today where everything is political and everything is sort of trying to say something or align itself with some kind of politics. I might think Vorg's line might come across as just kind of out of touch, right? Like
Yeah.
entertainment is it apolitical? What are you talking about? You know what I mean? So again,
But that's
I
kind
think,
of it's of a piece with Vorg. So Vorg is sort of he's well named, I think, at least the first syllable, because he's very vaudevillian. He's very much an old school entertainer, and he's kind of crappy, right? That's sort of part of the idea
yeah.
is that he's just not very good at entertaining. Even his miniscope is like you sort of get the sense that the stuff that he's put there is just not very interesting. Like
Yeah.
he's
Oh,
inherited a bad miniscope.
like it's
And
like Ogrons and
it
Cybermen
literally has
sliding around.
Ogrons. Our first encounter with Ogrons, which we use, Pull to Open listeners know, in our rating system, is the first time they've appeared. And like they're deliberately chosen in this,
Yeah.
I think, to play up the notion that we're talking about a miniscope full of crap monsters. But again, meta commentary on Doctor Who.
Well, it's kind of
And
like
this is
he doesn't even mention the Cybermen, that he has
yes.
Cybermen, and there's
So
a Cyberman, and he's
that's
there,
what I
and it's
wanted
like,
to talk to you next about, Pete, because you are, as regular listeners know, big cyber fan. And here we have literally the only Cyberman of the Pertwee era,
right.
and described as a blob in a snowstorm. And Vorg is very dismissive of it. And actually, the guy inside the costume there has made a great go of it at conventions, Doctor Who conventions. As soon as he was like advertising himself as the only John Pertwee era Cyberman, people were rushing to get his autograph. Right.
Wow,
So
talk about a premium.
right?
Nice.
What do you think about? I mean, firstly, did you know that? I guess you did, as being such a Pertwee fan, or you've seen most of Pertwee. There's no Cybermen in it at all,
Right.
which is kind of weird, given they were such
Yeah,
a big villain in the Troughton era.
and such a as a fan, you kind of become a bit of a completist, right? You kind of
Yeah.
want there to be a Cyberman episode with Pertwee, and you kind of finally get it in the Five Doctors. Like he finally sort of encounters them in the Death Zone.
Yes,
But
after his run.
right, exactly, and so to see that Cyberman on the screen, I do remember seeing it and thinking, oh, maybe there's going to be some cool Cyberman stuff in this, and of course there isn't. So it sort of inadvertently gets your hopes up a bit. I do like it now, first knowing that doesn't happen, and Vorg's commentary, I think, might be interpreted as a bit of I would say unfair, but certainly the argument has popped up that the Cybermen are kind of boring.
Yeah.
And so
the
it's
fact,
again more meta commentary, right? It's like
exactly.
doesn't even talk about them. Like I'm sure they're like the C-list monsters in his scope. When you can watch these silver guys, but all they do is just plot around. It's kind of boring.
It is funny that they've got Ogrons, which are like Dalek adjacent, and he's got the Cybermen. He's got the two biggest. He mentions at least the two biggest Doctor Who villains, but kind of in both cases misses the point, right? So I think this sort of emphasizes that. But the meta commentary, when he says blob in a snowstorm, we've been to 10th Planet, we know that's how the Cybermen are introduced in a snowstorm, right? They are blobs in snowstorms. That's almost a Moffat line, isn't it? You could totally imagine that would not disgrace a Moffat episode, that level of kind of meta awareness.
Totally. Who's going to pay good credit bars for that, man? It's not going to work.
Yeah, and that's sort of the interesting thing about Vorg is that he's you mentioned the credit bars. He ends up using just a game of Watch the Lady to kind of win money out of the Interminer officials at the end of the episode. Like he's just a hustler, man. He's just hustling for a buck. He doesn't know how the miniscope works. He pretends to know. He even escapes, like, even though he's the reason that the Doctor got trapped in there, the Doctor kind of almost treats him as an equal. You definitely get the sense that Vorg and Schurner are like a Doctor and companion commentary. Right?
Well, Vorg isn't necessarily wrong that this is a good spot for him. Like basically, these are a bunch of rubes, right? They literally are, because they have no contact with anyone else. So I sort of talked about this, probably shouldn't have in the plot summary because it's not that relevant. But this is essentially a race of xenophobes.
Yes. And
they have a caste system. So there's clearly a ruling class in the functionaries.
And they've kept all alien visitors out.
Right. So it's perfect. Like Vorg is like, you kind of wonder why they came here. And that's kind of one of the things I wanted to ask you, like in terms of why did they come here in the first place? Well, it's because, like, hey man, it's literally a planet full of rubes, and all I have to do is a little 3-card Monte, and we're going to come away millionaires. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And we'll bring this scope, and they'll pay big credit bars for it. Yeah. I totally buy it. I love the way that they emerge into the story through the luggage chute.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And by the way, this is apparently a planet, Interminer, where all of the luggage arrives wrapped like Christmas presents.
Not that silver wrapping paper.
Yes.
It was so great.
Please remember to identify your own luggage with the silver wrapping paper, because it might look similar to every other piece of luggage.
I gotta say, they definitely made Doctor Who back in the day on $5 an episode, but they spent all $5 on this one. Like they really did, and they stretched that $5 as far as it would go. And I'd say the only thing that really is painful, even the Plesiosaurus isn't that painful. It doesn't nowhere near as good as the drashigs, but um, the most painful thing are the masks on the functionaries.
Yes.
Those look really bad. That's the only thing that doesn't work. And I think what they were, I believe they were going to actually have masks on the tribunal as well,
They were.
just to show that they were going to all the same race. But it was like the masks are so bad, and you really want that facial expression with Kalek, Orem, and Pletrak.
Yes.
That they made the right call. Let's just throw a bunch of blue-gray makeup on them and go with
they
that.
do. The three of them are a masterclass on how to make three almost costumed the same people look different with different personalities, and you kind of want to take the people who did the Klingons in Star Trek Discovery.
Oh yeah,
like with the masks that barely move.
Right.
It's really hard for an actor to emote in those. You kind of want to show them this, be like, look, just a bit of gray makeup. And this totally works, even though their bald wigs are kind of slipping off at one point.
Right.
Like it's really bad. But to your point about stretching the budget, I mean, this is a show that was made specifically because it would be cheap and easy. This particular story was commissioned for that reason, and it would help them spend money elsewhere in season 10. And this was just the idea of doing it in two different sets. Sort of, so you didn't need all of the actors there at the same time. That was a way to cheap out,
well, there's like three settings, right? There's the boat. There's technically four, but I don't really count the marsh. But there's the boat, there's the scope, and then there's sort of the real outside, the Interminor Customs facility or whatever it is.
Yeah. And the boat was actually of the era. Well, it was of the 30s.
Right.
And they're actually filming on it.
So there's the set of the cabins, but then there's they actually filmed a lot of stuff on a boat, and it was apparently going to be decommissioned. But there's I gotta say, the really good camera work, and Barry Letts directed this as well. He made some really good choices in that when they do the location work on an actual boat, because he makes sort of lemonade out of lemons, because you couldn't really shoot conventional angles, because then you would see it's just on a river and they're not in the middle of the sea. So, but that makes all the angles that on the boat really more dramatic, right? He's shooting up ladders and down on the deck, and in sort of ways that you just see this sort of vast cargo hold, and not really concerning yourself with where they are exactly. So the boat stuff really worked, even though it's also suffers from that problem of episodes that repeat sequences. This happens in science fiction a lot when there's a time
you didn't like the time loop. I first of all,
I liked it. I thought they handled it well, because they would change, obviously the Doctor and Joe remember, so the events change, and even when you watch the same events again, they focused, for example, on the close up between Andrews and I think Claire is her name. In the second or third time around, so you sort of see that budding romance a little more clear.
You do. You see different aspects of their conversation as they take their turn around the deck, and Andrews is always pointing out it's 20 laps is a mile. But I just rewatched the first episode just before we started recording, and I noticed that the very first time Andrews doesn't ask Major Daly if he wants to join them on the turn around the deck. He's going for it. He's like, I'm taking Claire. See ya, old guy.
Well, it's funny. I guess you could chalk that up. They're literally not going through the same moments in time. So maybe there's they skip a beat every now and then. But I did like that when they keep repeating that, that's becomes such a predictable line, right? The 20 times around the deck is a mile.
Yes.
And you're right there with Joe and the Doctor when they're predicting the next thing. Oh, we're due for the monster bit in a second, So Joe and the Doctor, as those sort of ciphers for the audience, just oh yeah, this isn't boring. We just need to figure out our way around this pattern that we know now, because now we have our goals change from episode to episode on what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
it
Joe
works.
Joe figures it out. Joe, there's a line about lateral thinking, which was all the rage in the early 70s.
Right.
You know, Edward de Bono wrote that book in the late 60s about lateral thinking. The Doctor explains it to Joe, and she's like, "Oh, you mean literally we move sideways back into the ship?" And the Doctor's like, "No, I didn't mean, oh, yes, that's actually a great idea. We can go get some rope, like that they need to get down to the shaft." Wonderful line, lateral thinking, literally. But also an example of like Joe has a lot of agency in this episode. She's
It's a great
almost
episode for
smarter.
Joe.
She's smarter than the Doctor.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. And people have come to Doctor Who fans and longtime fans have commented about how Carnival of Monsters is in many ways the archetype for New Who, for Doctor Who going forward. Like it kind of starts here.
Yeah.
With the companion being a little bit smarter than the Doctor in a lot of ways, even referring to the Doctor as her confused uncle. That sort of that feels very New Who-ish. And Joe in this episode, she's really a prototype Sarah Jane. In the level of agency that she has.
I think it also just shows how far the characters come. And I pretty, it was obviously some kind of conscious decision, but Joe, when she pulls out those keys, is a bit of a turning point for her, right? Because it's like, you think about, we've done Terror of the Autons and how she is just, woefully represented as this sort of bumbling idiot who needs to be saved constantly. And in this episode, she has that great moment with the keys, but also throughout, like you say, she's has dialogue with the Doctor that shows that she's an equal. And even when she's sort of shunted into needing to essentially stall on the ship for most of, I think, the last episode and a half or so, she's doing it very capable. Like she behaves as if she's the Doctor almost, right? She's kind of, all right, I know the routine, I'm doing this, and she's pulling out the keys again, and she's constantly just in command of the situation.
It kind of reminded me. So the motivation in the first episode, the reason that Joe and the Doctor have a hard time getting out of the stateroom of the ship where they're sort of trapped when the old duff of a Major and Claire and the captain come in. Not the captain, the Ian Martin character, Andrews, yes. They're sort of trapped because Joe wants to convince the Doctor that this is Earth. So she, she finds a newspaper that says 1926 on it. Now are you convinced? Reminded me a little bit of a very sort of New Who convention where the Doctor and a companion are arguing, and that's what's driving them out of the TARDIS. I was reminded of Eaters of Light.
Right.
The argument is about what happened to the Ninth Legion. Let's go find out. So that's kind of they're almost like settling this bet as you go forward through the plot of like, is this Earth? Is this? The Doctor's like, no, this is. I'm telling you, this is Metropolis 3, or somewhere in that system. There's also something at stake, like in the context of the three Doctors here, right? There's the previous story. The Doctor now has the keys to his motor back. He can now go places, so he's like kind of upset and indignant that he hasn't found the right place, maybe.
Well, it's kind of interesting to think about the Green Death, which we've also done.
Yes.
In the context because that's the end of this season. And you get this sense here that the Doctor is now that he's freed of his exile and he's back in the TARDIS, and he's got a chance to sort of renew this relationship with Joe in a special way. Like now I can really show you the universe and what this is about, and also the deepening relationship we're going to have because of that, right? And you kind of like, if you see it from Joe's perspective, she's into it. I mean, she likes him and is certainly capable of that. But it is interesting to sort of reflect on Green Death, and she's like, you know what? That all is awesome, but it's not for me. Like I'm gonna. She pulls away ultimately from that, and you can kind of feel even more like what could have been. You know what I mean? Here because mostly, they were obviously Joe was a long running companion, but she was mostly confined to Earth with the Doctor, right? Even though there were obviously adventures. The Time Lords would occasionally like make them go somewhere.
But she never got to go to Metropolis 3.
No,
which is interesting.
so she got the chance. She did.
Yeah, they never actually made it there. She did get the crystal from Metebelis 3. So, okay, so just to lay this all out there and to pose a very interesting question that connects with the Pertwee Baker regeneration, right? Ooh. Because we're on that track now. This is the first mention of Metebelis 3, which for some reason the Doctor wants to go to straight away after he's been freed by the Time Lords. We don't know why he's got this bug in his bonnet about Metebelis 3. He says the air smells like wine or whatever. Like he's really excited about showing
He's read some kind of travel magazine.
Yeah.
In years. And it's like, man, I really got to check out this planet.
He read the National Geographic feature on Metebelis 3. I was like, geez, I got to get that. The air's like wine. Well, he's claiming to have been there before. Then he goes there in the Green Death. As we've seen, it is really not as advertised in the brochure. It's quite dangerous. He ends up with this crystal that kind of messes things up in the Green Death, and then he ships it to Jo, and then Jo sends it back from the Amazon in Planet of the Spiders, which is why he goes back to Metebelis 3, which is why he ends up regenerating. So my question to you, Pete, is is this actually the Doctor's own will to go to Metebelis 3? Or is this perhaps something that the Time Lords implanted in his brain as a backup? If he ever escaped his exile, he would really, really, really want to go to Metebelis 3, and that would lead him to have to regenerate again.
Yeah, it's interesting. Coming here from Logopolis, I don't even necessarily think the Time Lords need to be involved, right? I think we just came from a regeneration with the Watcher, which we talked about then, could be sort of this echo, of the future, the regeneration that happens, sort of, falling back through time and sort of guiding him there.
Yeah.
So maybe this is exactly it. Where does the Pertwee Doctor's motivation to go to Metebelis 3 come from, right? And that's kind of what we're getting at. And it's like, well, maybe it's literally his future self is implanting it in himself in almost the way that the Master had this. That was the Time Lords in that case, and the Master had the sound of drums put in his head.
Yes.
But he basically convinces himself that he wants to go to Metebelis 3 because he knows he has to start this chain of events with the crystal to regenerate and save everybody in sort of the right way. So
it's interesting because it's a multi-season arc, the Metebelis 3.
Yeah, right.
Before they even did season arcs, really. I mean, I guess you could say like the Master's a season arc or whatever, when he first comes along, whatever. But yeah, they didn't really do that in the old show, with the exception of things like the Key to Time. But this is like, I don't know how much Robert Holmes was thinking of this, but it was like laying the groundwork for the Doctor's eventual regeneration with this constant mention of Metebelis 3. But I just love that idea that he first wants to go there, and it's almost as if the TARDIS is warning him by taking him to this place where people are in time loops, and they're kind of stuck in this dangerous situation. They don't even know it.
Okay, speaking of time loops, there's one thing that sort of stuck out to me this time, where there's the bit where the drashigs attack the ship, and they shoot one. And then everybody resets and goes like 20 times around the decks a mile again. And I'm like, Joe's like, we were just fighting monsters. And it's like, what? No, we weren't. And it's like, let's go out on the deck. Like, why didn't you say, I can show you the monster that we just shot. like
giant hole in the ship.
This is kind of why I don't think that part really works. I mean, because wouldn't they, I guess you could argue the perception filters or whatever that they have that are keeping them from seeing things might get them to not see it, but that's a lot to not see if a monster is just broken through the deck and is now lying dead on either in your hold or on the deck. Like, really? You can't see that? And
well, to be fair, it is established early that there are things that people on the ship can't see, right? This is a wonderful episode for gaslighting. It's kind of a theme in a lot of the Doctor Who stories we've come across. Is gaslight. Often the Doctor's companion gets gaslighted. Jo was gaslighted in Claws of Axos. Very recently we just did that, and here she is. Here they are being gaslighted again. Here she is being gaslighted again by the ship's crew. Doesn't remember fighting monsters, but we do have that wonderful the hexagonal metal plate that the Doctor and Jo find and use the sonic on big episode for the sonic screwdriver,
Yeah.
by the way.
Well, they actually use some kind of magnetic device. That's the doctor. I remember
Okay.
he had to go back in the first episode to get it.
Yes,
I don't know
not
why.
the sonic.
Yeah, because lets them. It probably would have been the Sonic in a draft, and then they're like, well, the
Yeah.
Doctor needs a reason to go back to the TARDIS so they can see the hand, right?
Yes.
So then it has to be this magnetic thing. And I got to say, those metal plates, again, it holds up. It actually
Yeah.
looks like a metal plate. Did it a good job on those.
They really did, and just that notion of like, Doctor Who. I think what part of what we're learning here is Doctor Who thrives on creative constriction. Right. Anytime you can limit it to, the Doctor Light episodes in the new series gave us Blink.
Yeah.
Because of
It
that
also
need
gave
for
us like Love and Monsters, so
which I love. We'll get
Wins and
there. We'll get there.
losses. Yeah, we'll get there. I monster it.
Oh, I do love and Monsters. I don't understand the hate. Anyway, but yeah, and here we have a show that was deliberately designed to be cheap. Robert Holmes, and because that Robert Holmes just goes nuts, and he just there are wonderful things like the use of time loops. By the way, I think the randomizer is correcting me when I was talking about Eve of the Daleks as the only time Doctor Who has done time loops. Clearly not the case. Carnival of Monsters.
Well, they did I guess they don't do the loop, but in Claws of Axis, that's how he loops the axons. The axon.
That's true. Yeah, you don't actually see the loop. You just it's telling, not showing.
Right.
In that case, unfortunately, but yeah, it happens here, and they do so much with so little, like the time loop, like the fact that the ship's passengers can't see what's right in front of their faces, and just repeat dialogue, and the metal plate on the floor, like it becomes much creepier when they can't see it. Like how do you make a silver hexagon creepy? Well,
right.
Some characters can see it, others can't.
It's
kind of
like
a police box in a hold creepy. Just have a hand coming in, grabbing it. Yeah.
It's kind of like if you ever know someone who's like a sleepwalker, and you're trying to talk to them, and they seem just very confused and incomprehensible. It's a frightening thing, like this is the whole thing when you perceptions are different. They're not even sharing a common language of reality anymore. And you it's scary. It's just inherently scary. So it's used pretty well here.
And speaking of inherently scary, should we talk about the drashigs?
Oh, I was just gonna say, read my mind. Drashigs, they are great. I gotta say, they hold up. They really do. And I think
they're puppets, and yet they hold up. Yeah, it's weird.
They spent more money on the drashigs than the plesiosaurus, fortunately, because they knew they were going to be on screen a lot more. But they did some really good choices, like the cool sort of weird eye stalk thingies that come out, which aren't eyes, I guess, because the Doctor talks about them being blind and hunting by scent, which is kind of like, that's just kind of a scary idea. They have these things, but they're not really eyes. And they also, I guess, for the teeth, they used actual like skulls, bleached skulls of dogs, I guess. So that's why those teeth look really, really good. But the absolute best thing about them, I gotta say, is the roar. The roar of the drashigs is freaky, man. It is like you can't even like you've never heard anything like it. I certainly haven't before or since, and it's just this bizarre, screamy, roary thing. Like it's higher pitched than you'd expect from like a tiger or whatever. And I think that was a good choice. And they make they obviously ramp up the suspense with it by like having it faint in the distance at first, and then it comes closer and closer. So it really worked. My kids were freaked out by them. They weren't quite hiding behind the sofa, but they really liked the drashig cliffhanger. That was their favorite.
Yeah. And so for so little money being spent, and in fact, this is how playful Robert Holmes is being. The name Drashig comes from dish rag, right? He just reverse, because that's what he assumed they were going to be made out of. It wasn't actually the case, but he was just like, oh yeah, and then we have the dish rags, because that's probably what the prop department's going to use. And they end up being actually pretty creepy. And it's a good question, like, why do they work when they're not necessarily more expensive than the rats in Talons of Weng-Chiang? Famously bad prop that we've talked about a lot before. And it's
Vorg has some dialogue that plays them up too. So
that's part of it, is you hear about them before you see them.
Yeah, it's they really build up the suspense really well. You hear about them, they get to the marshland, and the Doctor and Joe are completely alone, and you're kind of like, oh, and you already know this is
Mm,
the drashigs hangout, and then you hear the roar, and then you don't see them until the very end of that episode, and it's a great cliffhanger. I got to say, what Vorg says, I mean, Vorg is a showman, right? So
mm,
he's always exaggerating because he talks about some military unit that ended up going to the Drashig planet with all the latest
yes.
armaments, and then they were all slaughtered. Where it's like, well, but then someone with a Tommy gun could take one out just like in a few seconds. It's like, okay, well, I guess there's probably like the latest armaments were Nerf guns or something. Like maybe it was just like a high school field trip. Maybe that was really what happened there.
Yeah, it was something like a laser detachment that Vorg was in when he was doing his national service.
Right.
Um,
He takes a bunch of them out with an eradicator later, which is pretty cool.
yes, the Eradicator. Yeah, we'll get to that. The only weapon on the planet of Interminer. But yeah, the Darkshigs. I don't know that maybe I they were overhyped. Like I read up on them too much before actually seeing them again. I think they work in one way. They work because the camera kind of lingers on them, which is
Hmm.
weird to say
Yeah.
for a Doctor Who monster. You sort of think the opposite would be true. Like they did this. George Lucas did this a lot with Star Wars. He was kind of embarrassed with the special effects, so he cut very quickly between them, not giving you the chance to linger and
Right.
see how bad a special effect was if it went a second longer. The Drashigs is kind of the opposite. You know, the camera actually kind of really lingers on them and how they glisten, and
Yeah.
you know, even though yes, you can see their puppets, your brain has enough time to like kind of register that they also look a little bit creepy, and they've got like slime on them, and they just, and then they cut back to a really tight reaction shot with the Doctor and Joe's faces and everyone on the ship
Yeah.
when they see a Drashig.
I think
So
it's
it's
like
very very good directing and cutting.
it's a smart monster design too. As you were
Mm.
describing it there, I think one of the reasons it lingers on them, it's giving your brain a chance to try to figure it out and sort of
Mm.
categorize this thing, and you can't
Yeah,
really, right? Because its head is more like a dog or some higher developed animal. It's got weird antennae or eyes that could be either or neither, and then you're like, does it have limbs? And it doesn't, but it does have this worm like quality, but it's not a worm. And it has these
mm.
weird little spiky tendrils on the outside. So they thought about like putting in a lot of different creepy things into something that doesn't make sense zoologically, but makes sense in terms of like a thing our brain should be terrified of. Like this thing is
Yeah.
ugly and gross and clearly does not want to be friends. Like
There
it's
is
just something you're scared
certainly,
of.
there's definitely a reference. So you mentioned it's sort of like a worm.
Mm,
It's also like a dragon, and I think it belongs in a very British tradition of there are legends of worms and serpents that were actually
right.
dragons. There's a wonderful Apple TV Plus series based on a wonderful book called The Essex Serpent. Right now is or came in this year with Tom Hiddleston about this whole question of like, does this creature exist? Um, and actually, I was at you may remember Lumley Castle, the 14th century castle.
Mm,
I was visiting a couple of Pull to Opens ago. I was coming to you live from Lumley Castle. There is a local legend dealing with the one of the original owners of that castle, the Lambton family. They about something called the Lambton worm,
mm,
and
wow.
there's a whole poem about it. This creature called the Lambton Worm, which is actually, you get into the poem, it's kind of a dragon-like figure.
Wow.
So the
It's like
Drashigs,
Dune.
yeah, they're definitely drawing on like ancient British mythology there to get their creepiness. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm surprised the Drashigs really this is their only appearance in Doctor Who, apart from kind of a flashback in
Yeah,
Frontier in Space. But I would love to see these reimagined for the new series. Like,
I would love it too. I'd love to finally see a Drashig tear someone apart, because that
right,
is that is supposedly the fate of Calic,
right.
Michael Wisher, aka Davros, the most racist of the Interminer, uh, people, the one who's plotting a coup. Um,
Well, arguably Vorg's a little racist too. He
well,
talks about
yeah,
them being gray-faced idiots, which is like, all right, that's
yeah,
Vorg. I
fair.
know. He's
Fair
an older
description.
guy though, so he's kind of like your uncle who you just kind of tolerate it.
The uncle who just doesn't like grey people. Yeah, it's a bit unfortunate. But yeah, there's a scene where Khalek gets torn apart by a drashig, right?
Right.
And we don't get to see that because apparently it was too scary.
Yeah, it's kind of like you blink and you miss it too.
Yeah.
Like and you kind of wonder what happened to him because he's just kind of like cowering.
Yeah.
There's a zoom in on Michael Wisher's face, and then it cut to the drashig that's clearly towering over him, but you don't see the moment. And I guess they filmed it. There, you could see it on the DVD or the Blu-ray.
Yeah.
And
Did you have you watched it? Have you seen it?
I
couldn't
saw
find
it. Like
here.
it's there. I mean, I don't know if the finished version is there. Or was in sort of the making of part of the Blu-ray, but it does very obviously look like a doll. And I think as the drashig is thrashing around, it's just a little too obvious. It just doesn't like it sort of takes you out of the moment. And I could see the decision to not use it, where it's like you kind of like you don't want to be laughing here or have an excuse to laugh.
Yeah.
So even though huge parts of Carnival of Monsters are all about making you laugh,
Right.
so I get it, but I do agree. Like, though the drashigs hold up, a lot of the CSO and effects around them don't. Right? Like, when they're peeking through the hole in the ship, and you see the drashigs and they're throwing dynamite at them, or they're just kind of like, in a scene with someone else or something else. It's very obvious, like, oh yeah, you're just splicing a couple of things together. They did the best they could. They pull it off. But I would love to see some upgraded drashigs in the new series, RTD, if you're listening.
Indeed. And you know what I would love to see in the new series? It gets mentioned once, and we've already been to the story that mentions miniscopes. Robot of Sherwood. Do you remember that? The Doctor wonders if he's trapped in a miniscope. I'd love to see the miniscope back, and I'd also love to know what you think of the fact that we learn that the Doctor got miniscopes banned, presumably as a young activist. He got the High Council of Gallifrey to somehow ban these throughout space and time.
Right? It's like, it's funny. It's this throwaway dialogue about the Doctor's past as a Time Lord, which Pertwee has actually a decent amount of.
Yeah.
And but if you think about it, it's like, wait a minute, whoa. The Doctor was bugging the High Council and they banned miniscopes, and they actually did it. Like, how the hell did that happen? Like, and you sort of try to place it. I guess, like you say, this must have happened when he was still on Gallifrey,
right
before he left, because it doesn't make any sense that this would happen while he's in exile or whatever.
It is. It's kind of. It's another one of those ahead of its time moments. I think of it almost a New Who moment where they tease something about the Doctor's past, where the Doctor comes across looking very good. And you can almost imagine, you can kind of see the Doctor as a student agitator, can't you?
Yeah, you can, because he's got to be like this. He basically, here's my theory: is like he's 100% what you said. He's this student activist. He's sort of throwing his weight around. It's his cause for whatever reason, and he shames the president on essentially Gallifrey Twitter. So like everyone's sort of piling on, and there's an outrage mob against the president. Maybe Twitter's new at the time, and the president just shrugs and says, all right, we could ban these scopes.
The Doctor went viral. Perhaps he did a TikTok showing what's actually inside these miniscopes, and how cruel it is to keep creatures like ant colonies. Or maybe actually what the Doctor was performing for Joe there. Like, the Doctor becomes a showman for a second, right? And he just goes, roll up and see the humans in their natural habitat.
Right.
And Joe, first of all, it's a little weird that Joe is creeped out by that. Like, Doctor, that's not funny. It's like, exactly. So I think he's channeling his own inner student activist there. And that's probably the TikTok that he did where he himself was imitating a showman. And calling out the High President. But, we are forgetting here. We're forgetting Rule 1. The Doctor lies, and I'd like to think that this actually wasn't the Doctor who led this rebellion on Gallifrey against miniscopes. It was actually some other student activist, but the Doctor kind of like remembers it as oh yeah, that was me.
He's
Yeah, I
just
totally did that.
he's just saying that to impress Joe. Interesting.
Exactly.
Rule one. Well, I'm kind of interested in why the president would give in, and there's the Gallifrey Twitter theory, but also remember the time scoop and the death
Mm,
zone, and
yes.
so it's not a miniscope, but it's sort of the same idea, and it's even worse, right? Because it's like not only do we have all these creatures, we're going to make them fight.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a shame of your own history that I'm sure the doctor brought up or whoever when they banned it. But also, did the president know that the time scoop was
Ooh.
still able? I guess the equipment was still existing, but they just banned the use of it. So maybe
Yeah.
maybe
If you
that was a factor. He didn't want any more scrutiny on the time scoop.
Yes, exactly. That seems like a very CIA-like operation, right? That they will ban miniscopes, and then all of the Gallifreyan journalists will be thrown off the scent,
Right,
and
exactly.
nobody's going to discover that we have time scoops operational in the dead zone. Yeah, I like that idea. I like it.
So it all
Speaking
makes
of the
sense.
Yeah, speaking of the Doctor's past, we learned that he learned boxing from
Right.
he was the bare knuckle champion of the 19th century.
I think he
He was
says
an
John
actual
L.
guy.
Sullivan. Does that
Yes,
sound
that's
right?
it. That's
Yeah.
John L. Sullivan. But he also says, so he has a boxing match with Andrews. So weird to see John Pertwee and Ian Marter kind of
Just
coming to
going at
blows,
it.
just going at him. But he also says Queensberry rules, and
Right.
Andrews is like, well, yes, of course. Queensberry rules means you wear gloves. It's literally not Queensberry
Right.
rules if you're just putting up your dukes like that.
Well, apart from the gloves.
Yeah,
It's Queensberry rules.
He should have just thrown in that line. Queensberry rules, yes, apart from the gloves. Boom.
I gotta say that was a very surprisingly violent moment for the Doctor in general, and also the Pertwee Doctor. Now, he obviously was the action Doctor, but he seemed to, whenever he had to do some sort of fisticuffs with someone, he would always fall back on Venusian. Sometimes it's called
Aikido.
karate, sometimes it's called aikido, but that was inherently less violent, right? Like he would just touch someone and almost prevent them. Essentially, it was more the prevention of violence than the actual violence. Now, I got to say, this isn't the only time John Pertwee's done. Like I think in the Monster of Peladon, there's a pretty famous sequence of him getting thrown around and stuff. But like for him to just like punch out the guy, like what? How is this the only time the Doctor literally punches out a dude?
Well, let's not forget we came here pretty recently after the Romans, and it's kind of interesting, isn't it? So the Doctor has that altercation in the Romans with the assassin sent to kill him.
Yeah.
And he talks about, and I think this was a William Hartnell ad lib, right? He talks about he'd studied with the mountain man of Montana or something like that.
Right.
And he was an expert wrestler. So, I think we said at the time, it's like we think of Pertwee as the action doctor. William Hartnell was a bit handy in a fight.
Yeah.
So
Didn't always need Ian there.
Yeah.
To take on the baddies. But yeah, this is definitely like a very sort of unusual moment. It's funny to see Ian Marter, by the way, looking so young. Oh my God.
So young.
Yeah.
And it kind of is his chance to kind of play a bit of a cad. This guy is definitely not as friendly as Harry. He doesn't like stowaways.
Yeah.
He does like boxing. He has designs on the Major's daughter.
Although he's like, I gotta say, who wouldn't?
Yes.
On a ship, and you're the cool Navy guy, and the father seems kind of encouraging of it. I mean, he's kind of like, you guys go ahead. Like, he's all very old school. And I got to say, who played Major Daly?
Tennille Evans.
Tennille Evans. He is so good in that role, like as the classic British gentleman, sort of Edwardian era, just like old school. He's drinking and
he's being casually racist.
Yeah, he's got his nose in the air a little bit for sure, but you can't help but quite like him because he's just so gregarious.
He's a classic old duffer. Do you know why he's there? Why he was chosen for this role?
I do. Apparently, good friends with John Pertwee.
Not only that, he was the one who persuaded John Pertwee to go audition for the role of the Doctor.
And that worked out. So this is sort of, returning the favor.
And they were in a radio comedy together called The Navy Lark, which is what John Pertwee was most known for before Doctor Who. So it's very appropriate that they were here on the deck of a ship. And I love that they're sort of trying to, like, the Doctor meets this old duffer major who's talking in a very sort of 20s British way, what, and tries and fails to kind of get into the lingo. He says 99 skidoo.
Yes.
You call
Trying to
that? It's
keep up.
actually 23 skidoo is the
Oh, okay.
phrase. So I like that the idea the Doctor is deliberately mangling it.
Doesn't he like ask for a whiskey or a scotch or something at some point, or like when they're pouring
Yes.
drinks?
Yes, so the Major keeps offering his companions a sundowner, which
Right.
I don't know if that's a cocktail or just a reference to, the sun's past the yard let's have a drink.
Right.
And then the Doctor asks for, I think he asks for a whiskey, and appears to get one. It's interesting. Now we know the Doctor's drink. I guess this is why he put the brandy aside in Twice Upon a Time.
I mean,
that's why it lasts all that time.
I feel like being a stowaway in the 20s wasn't that bad.
No.
Like they're just kind of there and like, all right, well,
Yes.
you're here. Why don't you have a drink and let's hang out?
Traditional rules of being a stowaway: if you can beat up like the ship's official, you get to stay. That's just it.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Did you
Totally.
notice, by the way, the Major refers to Joe as a memsahib,
Right.
Memsahib,
Right.
which is another vaguely racist term, means sort of, upper class or married white woman.
Hmm.
And so you're accorded different treatment if you're a memsahib. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Class
very
systems
much
everywhere.
Yeah, so this is very much Robert Holmes kind of poking fun at the old British Empire at a time on British television where you could actually start to do that for the first time.
Wow. Nothing serious, nothing political.
Exactly, and yet it's criticized the whole of British culture for most of the 20th century.
It's just such a smart script. I mean, it just
Yeah.
really like it comes together. I mean, there's some gags that honestly, I gotta say, it might be, you might disagree, but even the gag with it's so in your face where it's like, can you touch this here? Okay. And Sherna shocks herself. Borg is just like, I think it's Leslie Dwyer's performance
Yes.
that nailing the line, and he's just like, oh yeah, that must be the live circuit. Like it just completely deadpan.
Leslie Dwyer, I mean, I gotta give him a shout out.
Yeah.
I know we've talked a lot about Vorg in this episode, but he really, the twinkling of his eyes is so, like, you cannot help but like Vorg. He's the perfect avatar. Even when like he shocks his assistant, he's clearly not good to his assistant in a lot of ways. She's definitely the long-suffering companion
That's true.
of that relationship. He's always trying to pull a fast one. And he's kind of the carny, he speaks Polare, which is,
right.
I don't know if you
real language.
It's a real language. Did you know anything about Polare?
No, not at all. But I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like I feel like there's circus. The circus has always had its own kind of culture, right?
Yes. Well, it's not just circus culture; it's also from Romany culture and sort of underground London of the 50s. It was very much the gay subculture back when it was illegal to be gay in London. This language was used, and there's a comedian that was very widely known on the radio around this time, Kenneth Williams. He was also in the Carry On films, who was gay and was part of that subculture. Brought Polare to a radio sketch show called Round the Horn. Like they used it in several sketches because the words, they were using them to sort of sound dirty, but kind of get away with it in front of BBC censors. So that introduced Polare to the audience. And they have this wonderful scene where Vorg is trying to talk to the Doctor in Carney language, in Polare, and apparently the TARDIS can't translate it.
I got that too. It's like, what? Like the TARDIS is just like, oh man, you figure this out. I don't know what's going on here. But I guess one of the things Vorg says, speaking of being vaguely dirty, he points to Sherna and says something like, isn't she a lovely woman, or isn't she a good-looking girl? Which is like, all right, guys.
Yeah, steady on, dog.
Yeah, I got to think like Sherna must kind of understand, right? I guess she's at that point pretty used to being objectified, but
yeah, I can imagine her just sort of rolling her eyes at that. Oh, Vorg again. But I love it that, I mean, first, I love that on so many levels. First of all, the meta level of like, he recognizes the Doctor as one of his own, the
Right.
Doctor as a showman,
Fellow
the Doctor as
entertainer.
a carny.
Totally.
Yeah, and that's so puncturing the fourth wall right there. And then the fact that the Doctor doesn't speak it, but actually behind the scenes, John Pertwee totally could. And
Right.
he and Leslie Dwyer were just amusing each other between takes, apparently, just talking in
Yeah, well, that's how
Bahari.
it got in there. I guess
Yeah.
they basically were like, let's do this fun scene,
Yeah, it was a
and
very late
they
addition
went
to
with
the
it.
script. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
absolutely. It's a lot of stuff that keeps to come in the script. Like, but Vorg, like he represents the old school showman, and it's sort of very interesting that this is 1973, and it's very. I don't know if you know the About Time series of books.
Oh yeah.
They are very, very comprehensive, and there's a whole essay. They have whole essays connected to Doctor Who stories, and the one essay for Carnival of Monsters talked about 1973 being sort of the apex of Doctor Who, the grooviest year in Doctor Who history. Doctor Who was so mainstream, everyone was watching it, everyone would talk about it, and it was also a time in Britain where, like, at the start of 1973, people were looking to the future, and it was glam, it was David Bowie, it was, glam rock was in full swing. Interesting factoid: this a group called the Sweet were number one when Carnival of Monsters came out with a big glam rock hit, was later reused in Doctor in the TARDIS by the KLF.
Cool.
Remember that song?
Yeah, do I?
So they talk about Carnival of Monsters being kind of the apex of that glam, futuristic-y, science fiction-y, fun,
Right.
new,
You
forward-looking
get echoes
entertainment.
of Logan's Run and
Yes.
all that stuff. Yeah.
And it has within it this sort of sad old entertainer who's redolent of old school Britain, of everything that has gone before, of everything that was outmoded in the 60s. And yet, Vorg and Leslie Dwyer in particular had he is best known for many people in Britain because he did a comedy in the 1980s called Heidi High, which set in summer camps in the 1950s. So it's a very deliberately nostalgic looking thing, and Leslie Dwyer plays this kind of drunk Punch and Judy guy.
Okay.
That's his character, and it's really a sad character. Like, he's so washed up, he's drunk all the time, he hates kids, he hates Punch and Judy, and that's his job.
Ouch.
And you can see Vorg kind of being in this, but like, it's Vorg with the light has gone out of his eyes, right? You could do some kind of headcanon with like Vorg was dropped on Earth and left here, but it's like, this essay talks about the fact that it's like, that was the direction of British entertainment. We thought we were going into the future. And then end of 1973, the oil crisis suddenly, the bad 70s kicks in, the 3-day week, the miners' strike. And all of a sudden, entertainment made this shift back towards Vorg-like entertainers who suddenly started dominating British television. There's a magician called Paul Daniels, who was very old school, came along in the late 70s. And America went through something similar, right? You guys, by the end of the 70s, elected a 40s movie star as president, kind of started looking nostalgically back. Shows like All in the Family.
Wow.
So, yeah. Vorg is the pivot point.
The Doctor should have offered to take him back to Earth.
He really should.
Didn't have the scope anymore.
But it's telling, isn't it, that he survives. Vorg is like the cockroach of this story.
Yeah,
he's going to survive no matter what.
Oh yeah, that final scene with the little sort of 3-card Monty thing he's going on there is like, all right, they're going to be fine. And then
he's always got to hustle.
There's the cute kind of like smile from Sherna, which is a nice little like just little emoji, punctuation right at the end of it. A little bit of a wink at the camera almost. She doesn't wink, but it is like this. Like, yeah, this was fun, guys, right? It's like, and it was.
Yeah, Vorg is almost he's a very American archetype as well, I think, right? That kind of.
What do you mean?
Well, I don't know, just sort of kind of like I want to say Death of a Salesman, but it's not that. It's more like the traveling entertainer in American culture.
Right.
And he has that whole line
like
about
the Music Man.
It sort of there you go.
Resonates. Yeah.
Yeah, the stranger who comes to town and mixes things up and makes everyone build a monorail.
He's really kind of a sad grifter.
Yeah.
ultimately. But
Yeah, yeah.
you had some fun while he was here, right? So it's kind of like it is what it is.
Exactly. You guys enjoyed the monorail that we built here in Springfield, right? Yeah, he's very much that kind of character, and he just
Well,
moves on.
we
Moves
got
on to the
to
next
talk
town.
about a few things before we go.
Yes.
And what one of the questions we have to answer is, what if the evil plot had succeeded, which is not Vorg's. Vorg isn't
Vorg's
the
not
evil.
evil.
No, he's just misunderstood.
He's just walking around with a case full of illegal
Yeah.
biological content.
But we got to figure out what the evil plot is. And my vote is Calix.
Yes.
So Calix, clearly the evil one among the tribunal.
We barely even got around to discussing, even in the summary, we didn't really explain the evil plots. Perhaps we should go into a little bit of what he
that's
thinks
true.
he's
I
doing
tried
here.
to. So in his mind, Calix believes that the direction that President Zarb is taking Interminor and is wrong. And Zarb is essentially opening things up a bit. He wants aliens to come, particularly aliens that might be entertainers and provide something for the functionaries. But essentially, this is a planet that's like, for whatever reason, has been burned before about aliens. It is now like, okay, we're going to let them come in. And Calix doesn't like that. He also, President Zarb is his brother.
Yes.
And he basically has designs to usurp his brother, take over, and make things miserable again for the functionaries, because he thinks that any entertainment for them would be bad, because then it will ultimately end in them taking over.
Functionaries are out of control, man. They're not working double shifts anymore.
Right, and they're running up. They ran up some stairs in the first 5 minutes. There's that scene where one of the functionaries goes up and he zaps him with his, looks like a spatula.
Yeah, or like a tuning fork or something.
Yeah, there's like the spatula guns the guys have. So he zaps him. So yeah, there's issues on this planet, and so Calix, the bad guy who wants to exploit Vorg and Shurna and their scope to take over, and by creating sort of this elaborate plot where, let's figure out a way to get these very dangerous animals out, cause massive destruction, and then Zarb gets blamed and he can take over. So that's all of his things that he does. It's kind of funny to see when he asks Vorg to save the Doctor and Joe by putting his hand in the scope, and he sort of talks about, well, I had a twinge of be nice. It's like it was all in service of trying to get the drashigs out.
One has twinges, which I love.
Yeah.
I love if Davros had said that. Like just somewhere in Genesis of the Daleks, one has twinges.
Yeah, nothing. That's all it was.
It would have been a great response to the Doctor's whole thing of like, would you let this virus out of its test tube?
Yeah.
Davros should have been like, one has twinges.
Well, which is kind of like here, he lets the drashigs out, which is kind of like the virus, but he does sort of feel like it's. I like the idea of him underestimating the potency of his own plan, and that he lets the drashigs out and doesn't really account for his own getaway. Like he sort of just on paper it seemed like a good idea, and then he just like, oh wait,
oops. I didn't think that it's the whole meme about the leopard eating people's faces party, which you may have seen on Twitter. It's like, I didn't think the leopard eating people's faces party would eat my face.
Yeah, it's like this
I
common
just supported it eating other people's faces. Yeah.
It is a thing that infects a lot of bad guys, and I think somewhat believably so. When you have someone who's used to being, just large and in charge and having people do things for him, you just assume a certain level of invulnerability. I sort of remember this also when I remember the first time I watched Demolition Man. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie.
Yes.
But the future president releases a bunch of prisoners and then ultimately gets killed by them, and it's like, how did you not see that coming?
Dope. yeah, that's very much Calix's problem, and it's interesting that he references this notion that like I think he almost said it straight out. We need a war,
right?
Which was a very current. I don't know if you've ever read a book called "Report from Iron Mountain," which was it was circulating a lot in the late 60s, early 70s. It was supposed to be. It was a satire, but it was supposed to be an actual report from the Pentagon saying, here are all the reasons why we need continued war. Right?
Mm.
If we let peace take hold, then that's going to be a big problem because this, and this. We won't be able to keep the population in control. It was a very cynical view that was only just starting with the Vietnam War to kind of gain circulation in 1973. This notion that we can control the population through war. And here, Karlik is actually using it. So, yes, geez, talk about no politics.
Yeah, totally. And talk about evil plots, right? Like he's pretty bad. So if we think about it succeeding, I guess you could say like maybe he does a better job of like hiding or actually just disposing of that power pack that powers the Eradicator. So Vorg can't save everybody.
Yeah.
So I guess you also have to assume he runs. He runs a little faster this time. So he gets away. So the drashigs get out. They eat everybody. So Vorg can't save the scope anymore. So basically the Doctor and Joe get killed along with everything and everyone in the scope. Now,
the Doctor can regenerate.
I don't know. Like if Karlik survives, if for whatever reason he runs faster this time, he ends up being president, I guess, and his plot works. And then, or if he dies, maybe Interminor just becomes this massive race of xenophobes, and his plot succeeds anyway, just without him.
Remember what happens the last time we let 2 aliens onto the planet? Don't let a single one on. In fact, go destroy all the aliens.
Yeah. But I guess the Doctor could regenerate. Would he regenerate in the scope, and then the scope doesn't work anymore, so the compression field's gone, so Tom Baker bursts out of the remains of the otoscope? I mean,
I love that idea for Tom Baker's like, so I'm here. Tom Baker and Joe Grant would be an interesting pairing.
Yeah.
Tom Baker and Katie Manning. Yeah.
But Joe would be dead, right?
Joe would be dead. Yeah. I guess he can't revive her. I don't know.
But the TARDIS is right there, so he could just go right in.
The TARDIS is right there.
Yeah.
Could use the TARDIS, like, a parting of the ways style to revive Joe. Maybe.
Could be.
Or make her a fixed point in time. Or, I don't know. I'm trying to smash
trying to give it a happy
New
ending.
Who mythology. Yeah. Just anything to get Tom Baker and Katie Manning in the same TARDIS. Yeah, I guess he would survive eventually. The TARDIS, maybe not so much. But I do kind of like the idea that Doctor Who just ends with the miniscope being destroyed. You fools.
Sitting there, yeah.
Exactly. He was inside the TV all along, and there he shall remain for eternity.
Now go outside. Watch out for those drashigs.
Yes. Go play, kids. Don't have nightmares. Yeah.
All right. So like moving on. Where do you think the Clara Splinter is here?
So I think the Clara Splinter has to be somewhere on the ship. First of all,
okay,
she's the one who loads the dynamite onto this random ship that really shouldn't have anything like that. I think.
Okay, yeah.
By the way, I don't think we've talked enough about the ship. It's supposed to be a mystery along the lines of the Mary Celeste, where the ship went,
right?
The SS Bernice, but it's not actually a real ship. It was made up. So, has time been rewritten here? Was there, before this timeline, before the Doctor saves the SS Bernice? Was it a famous mystery, and has the Doctor actually changed the timeline here? What do you think?
Yeah, so in keeping with the spirit of it, I mean, I have to think they survive, right? Because there's a popular theory that it just gets hit by a tidal wave after this.
Yeah, which would be so depressing.
Yeah, that's a downer, Andrews, Daly, and Claire, they're all like, all right. But so assuming they survive and reach Bombay, then time's rewritten.
Yeah.
I mean, notwithstanding rule 1. But so time's rewritten, and it's such would it cause a massive paradox? The Doctor's knowledge is sort of outside time to some extent, so I think it still works. I don't think necessarily all of time would change, and then I mean, not if monsters would come, but
none of the people aboard the ship are as inconsequential as they seem. Like, they're not really going to affect world history.
Right.
I don't see the Major going on to prevent World War II.
Well, maybe Andrews and Claire
Yeah.
get together and have a baby boy named Harry. Of course, why isn't he Harry Andrews?
Ooh. He was adopted. It was
Yeah.
actually a shameful thing. They had Harry out of wedlock.
Maybe
And-
Sullivan's his middle name.
Yeah. Or maybe it was named after this, maybe Andrews, like his whole life was like, and there was this one time I had a boxing match with John L. Sullivan on the ship. At least I think it was him. He looked pretty old. And he's like, and that's why we named you Harry Sullivan.
Yeah, I mean the simplest thing is that it just gets hit by a tidal wave, and we're done here.
Oh no,
I don't want to believe
Clara
that.
Splinter to prevent that. I think the Clara Splinter is on board the ship with the dynamite to make sure that ship actually makes it to Bombay, as it then was. And
see, I was thinking Clara might be in the future, or whenever this is set. Obviously, it's 100% unclear because we have no idea. Clearly, there's some time travel involved with the Plesiosaurus and the ship. They were essentially time scooped into the miniscope. It seems like, or is it right? Like maybe this is contemporary with that time. Who knows? But I thought she would be the one to give Vorg the tip to go to Interminor. So we see a version of Clara in the same way she's directing William Hartnell to the TARDIS.
yes,
Vorg's got like a bunch of pamphlets in front of him at some interstellar cafe, trying to figure out where his next place to go is going to be. And she's like, Interminor. That's where you want to be because
that's right.
They
need entertainment. They're grey. They're faceless. They're boring. They're dull. They would love to see the miniscope.
Yeah, I don't know. I forget if he says at any point who's sort of given him the tip, but maybe that's just a if he does, it's just a cover for Clara's. Clara's persona.
Doesn't he say like he came straight from some planet called Delos or something like that?
Yeah. So she's like a waitress there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also we also haven't talked about the fact that they keep calling human beings Tellurians,
right?
Which apparently is a Robert Holmes thing. It crops up in several other of his scripts.
Yeah,
and it is a translation of Earthling, of the word Earthling, I believe.
Okay.
Via Greek, so that's what it means.
So it's not just a bastardization of Terran.
No.
Yeah.
It's actually a legit way to say Earth people, but I just like the idea. He's like, no, we're not. We're not going to have the sci-fi trope where aliens call us Earthlings, because of course they wouldn't have the same name for our planet. Yeah. We barely on our planet have the same name for a city, like Mumbai/Bombay.
Right.
So of course, and I like the idea. He continues this, and in later shows, I think, including the Two Doctors. Earthlings are referred to as Tellurians.
It comes up. It definitely does. I wish they'd use it a little more. I sort of think I'd have to think about it if it was used in New Who. I'm sure it would have been mentioned, but I think there's some kind of word for Earthlings that comes up. But yeah, it's a smart choice. I like the all the sort of little details here that Holmes has sprinkled throughout the script.
Yeah, I'd love to see it as a kind of a continuing thing of like, Earth people, especially Earth people like the Major, who are a little bit racist in their everyday daily life, being introduced to a whole race of alien people who just keep calling them Tellurians. And he's like, Dash it all, we're not, we're Earth creatures. And we're like, no, we just call you Tellurians.
Yeah. And easily manipulatable. I like that he just dials a knob to make them mad.
It's just called like the aggressionometer or something like that. It's like
agrometer.
It's one of those moments where it's funny because of course in Marco Rani we were talking about how Pip and Jane Baker were just kind of messing around a lot of the time and thought they were really funny. And this is like Robert Holmes showing us how you do it.
Yeah, exactly.
How you mess around and have fun with Doctor Who and still actually make it funny and meta commentary and a great piece of entertainment all at the same time.
Exactly. Masterclass, Mr. Holmes.
Indeed.
And that's why I am giving this one in our rating system of Dalek, Ogron, or Viscount Banger. This is a Dalek for sure. Like I said earlier, it's textbook. And definitely, could use a little more polish. I mean, what story couldn't from the classic era? But I mean, the subversive script, it's got that twisty mystery right off the bat. That's really fun. And has a great monster. I mean, this is textbook Doctor Who. It's great. This is like I say, I would give this episode. Someone's like, where should I start with the classic series? Watch Carnival of Monsters.
Yeah, it's a great place to start. It was a great choice actually for the Five Faces of Doctor Who repeat. Again, we talked about this, the seminal British repeat show in 1981, which is the first time we saw doctors who were not the current Doctor on screen, and that was why there was a prohibition against it before then. Was that the BBC thought it'd be too confusing if you saw like Patrick Troughton or John Pertwee on the screen. When you're like, hang on, isn't Tom Baker the Doctor? My mind is blown. How can there be two Doctors at the same time?
Can you run a show again?
That's
After
crazy.
it's been broadcast one time, you could do it a second or third time.
Funny thing
Does
is,
that ever happen?
They do it all the time with other shows. They just wouldn't do it with Doctor Who for some reason. I don't know. So it was very telling, I think, that the Three Doctors and Carnival of Monsters, two back-to-back Pertwee stories, were part of the Five Faces. So they threw the Three Doctors in there because it's all Three Doctors, because why wouldn't you? Up until that point. Then Carnival of Monsters was the one that just represented Pertwee. So it's clearly a great creative moment for the show that is mentioned and remembered in its legacy. And that is why I am giving Carnival of Monsters a Viscount banger.
Viscount banger. Oh
yes,
my God.
It's a Viscount banger dressed up. And it's the Viscount. He's dressed up in his most colorful, groovy 70s gear. He's got like a plastic fluorescent hat on, and with his best Viscount mustache, drinking a sundowner.
All right.
Yes.
High praise. Okay, don't be handing these out like candy, Like
I know. We had one last week for Legopolis. I was tempted to say, well, maybe this is just a Dalek, but I watched it and I'm like, this is so watchable. It's so, as you say, such a great thing for all ages to introduce you to the very concept of Doctor Who, to introduce you to classic Who. And so, Viscount banger it is.
That's cool. I see where you're going there. I'm not quite going to change my rating, but it is like, I see where you're going there.
It is definitely not the Ogron.
Yeah, oh my God. It's so far from an Ogron. In fact, I would say it's not just a Dalek. I will say it's probably a Supreme Dalek. I can't quite get it to the banger just because it's ultimately like not a lot happens here, right? Like,
that is true. I will say that it's the one letdown with Carnival of Monsters is the way that it ends. It's just sort of like everything's tied up and resolved very quickly. The drastic invasion of the city. It's almost sort of not taken seriously. And the whole messing around putting Joe back in the scope. But it just, so if it has a weak point, I think it's episode 4. But that said, it does such a good job of entertaining you up until then that the very fact that the show itself sort of falls apart kind of becomes part of the meta commentary on entertainment and the miniscope, right?
That's pretty good.
The miniscope itself
I'd almost thought
pieces.
that. Yeah.
It's sort of like that great movie adaptation where the movie itself starts to adapt to the notion of being a cinematic blockbuster and kind of changes what it is. This is a Doctor Who story that is deliberately falling apart.
All right. Well, this podcast is about to run out of power as well, so we'd better run to our randomizer.
That's right.
Before the
drashigs
closes in on us.
Before the drashigs attain full height, we should get out of here.
Guys, it's time to leave the Miniscope and Carnival of Monsters and find out where we're going next, which means we have to engage the Tardis Randomizer to pick our next episode. It is now, the randomizer consists of 2 components, the Codex and the Executor, and the Codex now has a complete set
set of stories
of all of Doctor Who, every single televised story, 1 through 301 by our count, and we are now going to generate a random number within those limits to find out where we're going to go next.
That's right. We use random.org because what random.org is kind of a mini scope for atoms. It just plucks them from the atmosphere in their random bouncing around order, or notes them in their random order, and generates a random number that way, because computers are not very good at generating random numbers, nor are miniscopes. They just rely on algorithms. So we're not relying on an algorithm. We're relying on the very Doctor Who-ish formula of just using atmospheric noise. So when Pete gives me the countdown, I will generate a true random number between 1 and 301, between An Unearthly Child and Legend of the Sea Devils.
I will do that as soon as we get some challenges in here.
Yes.
We love to challenge the randomizer, and even though it might not hear us now, sometimes there's a delay. So do you want to go first?
Yeah, because last week, and I'm hoping we get the delayed result of this, I asked the randomizer to take us to a story from New Who, because we've been trapped in Classic Who for so long. It'd be great to go. Basically, it's split 50-50 in number of stories in the codex,
yeah, roughly,
right?
Yeah.
Roughly, between old and new. So it should be, all things being equal, 50-50 between old and new Who, but we've been trapped in old Who for so long. So I wanted to get us out, but I think after watching Carnival of Monsters, I kind of want to give it the opportunity to take us to somewhere connected to this somehow, whether it's through the groovy costumery, whether it's the mention of Ogrons. Give us some obvious connection to Carnival of Monsters. Give us something else that's fun and lighthearted and just a nice, easy romp.
Would you take a Harry Sullivan episode?
Yes, I certainly would. I certainly would, even if it means that we have to stay in Classic Who.
Cool. Well, I'm going to go with, because the Cybermen were so fleeting in this one, why don't you just take us to the Cybermen episode? Because there's lots to choose from still in Classic Who and New Who.
Time to redeem the Cybermen and show that they are more than just a blob in a snowstorm.
Exactly.
All right.
Let's
see if the randomizer is listening to us. Give me a countdown.
Is the executor primed?
It is primed and ready, sir.
Your countdown.
One is ready.
Your countdown begins at 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, Z.
50. It's not listened to me.
Oh, wow. Really classic. We are at Spearhead from Space. Wow.
Another Robert Holmes.
And the first John Pertwee episode.
The first John Pertwee. And another post-regeneration episode.
Right.
I think it did listen to me.
It did.
In the Robert Holmes connection. I think it's obvious. Yeah.
Randomizer definitely on a Pertwee kick lately. Because we recently did Claws of Axis. And the Green Death was a little before that. We're filling him in. We're filling him in because we've done Inferno for the Oddens. Yeah.
We used to say that Capaldi was the randomizer's favorite Doctor. I think this
Moved
may
on.
have tipped it over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
may
randomizer.
almost have done more Pertwee at this stage.
Yeah, we'll bite. This was like I will talk about it at the time. I remember seeing clips from Spearhead from Space a lot. I feel like this the image of the Autons coming out of store windows was such a archetypal image of the classic series and monsters.
Absolutely.
It's very much burned in my mind. So it'll be fun to.
There's a reason why they brought that image back for Rose, right? It's one of the ways in which the new show is relaunched. So
totally.
The randomizer is referencing New Who here, arguably.
Yeah. So, it's getting there. Maybe it'll go to Rose next, but we'll have to find out next week to see if we where we end up after Spearhead from Space. So come back for that one. Thanks for listening to this one, guys. This is Pull to Open. It's a podcast. If you have not yet subscribed, please go ahead, hit the button on whatever you're listening on. If you're on YouTube, hey, there's probably also a button as well as a bell of some kind that will get you notifications. Why don't you hit both of those? We'd really appreciate it. We're available on whatever podcast service you like. So if you're not listening to us on the thing you love the most, we're probably there now. We've definitely spread to all the good places. We're on Spotify, Apple, Google, Stitcher, Breaker, all the cool podcast services. And leave a review while you're there.
Yeah, I believe you can also get us on Miniscopes now.
Yeah. That's a new one. If they haven't been banned in your area, We'll be on your glow sphere shortly. You can always check us out on the socials, on Twitter and Instagram at Pull2Open63 and on TikTok at Pull2Open. We'll see you next time for Spearhead from Space.
See you guys.